If you want to know what a possible voice of the Parliament might look like, look no further than what's happening in Queensland. Their path to treaty, that's what they call it, could allow a veto on new mines. They've also flagged that reparations, which is compensation, could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars per group. And we're talking about 150 different Aboriginal groups across the state. So you do numbers on that. And it's taxpayers, of course, that'll foot the bill for all of this entrenched racial separatism. This is what it means if we get a voice and the treaties that will follow. Joining me now to discuss it all, Senior Fellow at the Menzies Institute, Nick Cater, Menzies Research Centre, that is, former Federal MP Nicolle Flint. Welcome, Nick and Nicole. Let's go, Nick, to this issue in Queensland. We are now basically getting the cat billed for us by the Palaszczuk government. I know from polling, the more people understand what's to come after the voice, treaties and truth-telling, the more people say, look, we don't support it. We thought it was just about recognition. It's a whole lot more. How cynical do you think the average Australian should be?
I think people are going to be really troubled by this, Peter. I mean, this is the path to a treaty and it's going to involve reparations and all sorts of things along the way. Mick Gooder, the Aboriginal leader who's been closely involved with the Palaszczuk government in mapping out this path to a treaty, says that those people who have not gained from land rights will be able to gain through this. Look, the granting of land rights was supposed to solve this and did give, land rights back to Indigenous people. Now it's going on and on. But there's a key question here I want to ask. Nobody seems to be asking this question. What right have people of this generation who identify as Aboriginal or have some Aboriginal heritage, what right have they to compensation for wrongs that were committed against their ancestors maybe 200 years ago? And the corollary to that is, what obligation do we as current taxpayers owe to them for things that happened a couple of hundred years ago? I mean, an immigrant from Vietnam, for instance, who fled the communists in 75, do they owe reparations? Should it come out of their taxpayer dollars? This is a very ill thought through thing and it will worry people a great deal.
What concerns me, Nicole, is we already have these land councils and there's very little transparency and integrity with where the hundreds of millions of dollars go to them, paid for largely by mining companies with native title obligations. I've been around government a long time, you have too. There's a lot of concern about where that money is spent and how much of it actually reaches Aboriginal native title owners and people on the ground. This is that on steroids.
Exactly, Peter. We should be hugely concerned about where this money will end up and who will benefit from it. Now, Peter, on top of mining royalties, payments like that, we taxpayers, Australian taxpayers, provide something in the order of $35 to $40 billion a year to support Indigenous Australians. We know that has not solved the terrible crisis that we're seeing in remote Indigenous communities. It hasn't solved the health, education, incarceration issues that are facing Indigenous communities. So where will this money go, as you've just pointed out? How will it be spent? And will Aboriginal people actually benefit? And will it help them to solve the intractable problems that they're facing, especially in rural, regional, remote areas?
Just a quick one, Nick Cater. Malcolm Turnbull said back in 2016, when we were in the middle of the same-sex marriage debate, that the rights of religious schools and organisations, he said, would be protected. Now, he failed to deliver the legislation, so did Scott Morrison. And now it's in the hands of Labor. There's been this Australian Law Commission report come out. It's drawn a lot of ire from Christian schools in particular, Muslim schools too, Jewish schools, not being able to hire people to teach that identify with their faith. Why on earth have we had to wait 7 years for a fair go for religious faith schools and organisations?
Well, they're probably the least popular minority group there is, Peter, is a simple answer. But look, I mean, this is unfinished business by the coalition. We should have got that protection through, the protection for religious freedom. We didn't. I do hope that Peter Dutton and his team are working on legislation to take to Parliament next time they're in government, because you can be certain it won't happen under Labor.